Hey folks, Friday, September 30th. Can't believe it's already September, right? There goes the summer. Well, actually for Humboldt County, September is like month one of summer, or two at least. But wanted to post another video as the Bloxburg community is still dealing with sickness, grieving, some caution with all that's going on with COVID and the fires just makes everything feel uncomfortable. So I get that. Hopefully we can be out there soon. I hope more than that you feel God's presence in your life, His purposes in your life, that your life isn't just on pause. And it sure can feel that way. I know that I feel that way a little bit right now, kind of like you're on a tarmac and you're just sitting there in line, planes ahead of you. You don't know which way they're going to put you, what direction, and you just want to take off, right? You just want to fly somewhere, do something. And that's a tough feeling, and it can cause some problems. In those places where you're just stuck, you can kind of go, well, I feel isolated here. Like I'm not doing my normal rhythms, right? You're not meeting with other people like you used to, or the same, your rhythms in life, right? Where you go there on Tuesdays and you hang out and have dinner with them on the weekends, and sports and all that stuff you get isolated. And in those places, there's just much danger. I spoke about this last check-in video to watch out for the disease of isolation. What I mean by that is when you're shut off from others, whether you choose to live that way, some people just work like the hermit style, right? Or if it's forced onto you, like what COVID does, your love for people, for God, it can start to dry up if you don't stay intentional about it. See, when there's less people in your life, daily, weekly, which it takes love to relate to people correctly, right? You get stuck with just yourself. And we tend to just go with the flow, and you turn inwards and you just start to pay attention to yourself, and all of a sudden love for others starts to just sneak out the back door. And you don't realize it until you go looking for it. And you go, where did it go? Someone just asked me if I wanted to go to the dinner on this weekend, and I don't really want to go. Or I don't feel like texting that person. Or no, I don't want to call them. Or no, I don't want to go to that birthday party. You find yourself in this different place. And I know that there's the old adage of absence makes the heart grow fonder. Okay, well, maybe for some star-crossed lovers, and it makes passion hotter or whatever. But for what we're talking about, being able to steward our relationships well, consistently, you need to be with one another. And isolation is the enemy of that. You get too comfortable when you're away from others, with being away from others. And when you dig into the well of your heart to see what is there for them, when the opportunity comes, all you come up with is this feeling of indifference. And that word is just a word I've been thinking about, and I just hate it. I think it's just a nasty word. I believe it is an enemy that has strengthened itself in the last 2 years against humanity and against God's church. It is like a emptiness. When you go looking for that feeling of love for someone, to engage with someone, it's just, there's no motivation. It doesn't make you dislike people necessarily. It just makes you not care. I mean, you still care for them, but you don't want to lift a finger. Well, where'd that come from? Isolation. Getting used to just caring and thinking about yourself. And it is a nasty thing too when you try to pull out and just like force yourself to go be with someone, help someone, love with someone. It wants to just make you turn back inwards on yourself, force you back to where it likes you. So I've felt this. Have you felt this in your life? It can spread to anywhere. Coworkers, friends, family. Oh yeah, kids. You feel it for your kids sometimes. You're like, why don't I care? It's real life. It's what happens. This is what selfishness can do. The way that God emphasized all of this for me recently, beyond just experiencing some of it, was taking me through 1st and 2nd Corinthians. Both are letters sent by Paul to the church there, the people in the city of Corinth. Now, to set the stage for the letters very quickly, Corinth was a port city, and think of like old drunken sailors and prostitutes. Like that's kind of how it was. Very extravagant sins that came along with living in the hopping city of Corinth. And so the church that was birthed there was birthed in that culture. So the growing pains of the church in Corinth is very messy, to say the least. And so the first letter that Paul writes to them, it addresses a lot of the junk that's going on in there, specific sins, situations, how to deal with them, kick that person out, forgive that person, warn that person. And it can, in some spots, it has a tone of like, just like heavy discipline. And it was tough. It was a tough letter, especially tough for the Corinthians to read. And you find this out in 2 Corinthians. Paul addresses his first letter. In his second letter, he's like, oh, guys, I know that was so tough. It was so hard for me to write it. And I know it was so hard for you to read it. And as I'm reading him talk about this, their feelings, his feelings, all of what they went through together, I was just amazed at how deep their ties were to one another, how much they loved each other, how much care for every little bit of each other's lives there were. So I want to just read a couple of these excerpts to you so you can get a taste of what I'm saying, and just I want you to think about your relationships and the example that the Word is giving us, the example, but also the opportunity we have as people to be connected to other human beings, what we were made for. All right, chapter 2, verse 4. Listen to this, opening up. For I wrote to you out of much affliction and anguish of heart and with many tears, not to cause you pain, but to let you know the abundant love that I have for you. Wow. 6, 11, 13. We have spoken freely to you, Corinthians. Our heart is wide open. You are not restricted by us, but you are restricted in your own affections. In return, I speak as to children. Widen your hearts also. This one's just the one that knocked me right off my feet. Listen to this. Chapter 7, 2 and 3. Make room in your hearts for us. We have wronged no one. We have corrupted no one. We have taken advantage of no one. I do not say this to condemn you, for I said before that you are in our hearts to die together and to live together. Do you hear that? He just said, our hearts are tied together. Our lives are intertwined in such a way that we live and die on the same road. It's amazing. How about 4 through 9, same spot. I am acting with great boldness towards you. I have great pride in you. I'm filled with comfort. In all our affliction, I'm overflowing with joy. For even when we came to Macedonia, our bodies had no rest, but we were afflicted at every turn, fighting without and fear within. But God, who comforts the downcast, comfort us by the coming of Titus. And not only by his coming, but also by the comfort with which he was comforted by you, as he told us of your longing, your mourning, your zeal for me, so that I rejoiced still more. For even if I made you grieve with my letter, I do not regret it, though I did regret it, for I see that the letter grieved you, though only for a while. As it is, I rejoice, not because you were grieved, but because you were grieved into repenting. For you felt a godly grief, so that you suffered no loss through us. And finally, down in 14, and besides our own comfort, we rejoice still more at the joy of Titus, because his spirit has been refreshed by you all. For whatever boasts I made to him about you, I was not put to shame. But just as everything we said to you is true, so also our boasting before Titus has proved true. And his affection for you is even greater as he remembers the obedience of you all, how you received him with fear and trembling. I rejoice because I have complete confidence in you. And it goes on. For whoever said Paul is cold-hearted, stern, mean, bigoted, you hear those words? I can't think of a man more sensitive and caring. If you read in other places, he's talking about the sorrow that some of them felt from his letter and the forgiveness he wanted them to feel from him. And if they forgave anybody within the congregation for sins that he spoke of in the first letter, that he would forgive them as well. And his forgiveness was their forgiveness. All the balls of yarn of relationships that they and we all deal with, he was so careful and sensitive and loving in them to him and with utmost care. And I would say that that is the opposite of indifference, isn't it not? Love is the opposite to indifference. Love, that word, probably the biggest word there is besides maybe God, whether you're a Christian or not. That is the most spoken of word, I think. It's what's discussed, debated, and needed more than any other thing. And it's true. Paul himself, writing to the Corinthians, said that when you strip everything else away in life, even the church and prophecy and tongues and giftings and all of that stuff, there's only three things that really remain: faith, hope, and love, right? And of these three, the greatest is love. Now, I struggled a little bit with that just because I've been on this kick through Luke and Acts, and it's just so much based in faith, walking with faith. But I realized that love is the precursor of faith. You can't have faith. You don't have faith in something. You don't want to exercise ridiculous actions that make no sense on something that you don't care about, right? Jesus would have never been able to love the Father, love us, put himself on the cross in faith if he didn't first love the Father. They made that plan to do what he did on this earth, and Jesus was willing to walk it out through faith because he loved his Father so much. Faith is the fruit that comes from the roots of love, right? And you see this in Jesus's life, in his rhythms as you read the Gospels. It starts with him and the Father. And he'd be praying in the mornings in the dark before anybody else got up for hours sometimes, even through the night sometimes. And then when day dawned, he'd come down. It says a lot of times like off the mountain, he would go get, his me time was the Father time. And he would go and he would then serve everybody and anybody who came to him. And when you read, you are just astonished at his capacity to serve all day long. And then he would go back to the Father the next morning, into the night, get filled up. And then he would go out again the next day after he was full of the joy of the Father, the purposes of the Father. And he would go do it all again. And this isn't a picture of like, you know, him being filled up and then splashing a little bit out of his saucer on a couple people here and there. The picture is more like a 5-gallon bucket just being dumped and filled and dumped and filled down to the last drop, which came out on the cross. Jesus poured his whole life out. Everything he got in, he let go right out. Amazing. So, if we are talking about love, and it's going to be the way that we fight indifference. What's a good definition for love? And I used to think, of course it's not fuzzy feelings. Of course it's not infatuation, even though that can get all tied up and twisted in there. I thought, man, it's sacrifice. When you read the word, it's about nitty-gritty actions for other people. And that's true, but I'm missing something in my definition. I think it's here. It comes from one of my favorite Bible teacher, John Piper. This is his definition of love in one of his books. Quote, "It is the overflow and expansion of joy in God which gladly meets the needs of others." Let me read that again. It is the overflow and expansion of joy in God that gladly meets the needs of others. So I got the second part, the meeting the needs, but before you do that, you got to go first get filled up. And see, you can sacrifice for people. You can do things, meet needs for other people. But if it doesn't have love, it's not going to be doing it gladly. I think that's why I put that word gladly in there. We can do it from duty, but that's something different. Sometimes that can be from pride or arrogance, and you're actually taking from people as you serve them. Ugh, that's nasty, isn't it? So first there's this receiving of joy in God down into one's own heart. And it's so big and expansive that it overflows out of you. And as your eyes meet other people, it finds its purpose and its mark. And then comes that sacrificial service. So this is something that I want to grasp, right? Something I want to get. So let's talk a little bit about how you do that. Here's a quote from an article I just read on this. It was about loving men of God, men loving God, being a man that loves. And this is the end power paragraph that the guy closed with. Check this out. I think it's a call to me, a call to you, something I want dearly. Quote, "For love to bear, it must die to comfort and convenience. For love to believe, it must die to cynicism. For love to hope, it must die to self-ambition. For love to endure, it must die again and again to self. Loving men are always dying men and happy men. As they die, they follow Jesus, quote, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross." It's from Hebrews. "Like him, men of God love and die for joy." So how do we get there? How do we fight this indifference with this love? Sometimes I love even the thought of the fight, because you can't just conjure up love, right? Out of nowhere for somebody. You can't just conjure up love for God. That's why it says God loved us first. You have to go in order. Don't be fooled. You can't just go along the road looking for love and seeing all the wells that are all advertising love. One says spouse, children, friends, family, success and job. None of those things, romance, any of it. They are wells that go empty and need filled in again from the true source. Sure, you're going to get some love, some affections for things of value like your children or your family, but you can't suck from them to get this everlasting love that bears all things, hopes all things, endures all things, like it says in Corinthians 13. You have to go to the source for that, and God is the source, the spring from which love originates. Before love, I should say, check this out, before faith is love, and before love is God, and before God there's nothing. There's only God. And it's overflowing, this love from God. He doesn't have to go get it from somewhere else, and that is why and how it is powerful enough to create in us the same type, the same type of life that Jesus had himself. It says that we are the body of Christ. He is the head, and he means through his Spirit to live his life out through us, and that comes from the love of the Father. So, for practical purposes, we would be asking, well, how does it work? What does it look like? Every one of your all's lives looks different. You all have different relationships, timing, opportunities, doors shut, doors open. So we got to set all that aside for a second and say, well, what's the one common thing that we can all do to ensure that God will bless all of those things to where we can love people, be full of love, and fight indifference? And the answer is going to God for joy. What does it say in the end of Revelations, the end of God's book? He says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. That's your heart. And for those that open up to me, I will come in and I will sup with him. I will dine with him. That I know to be true. If you go to God for your joy, for your expansive, overflowing fullness, nowhere else, he will fill you up. And it will be to overflow. And you will be then able to love others. You will want to love others. And God assuredly promises he will shape your life. Jeremiah 29, I have plans, a future, a hope for you, to prosper you, not to harm you. He wants his kingdom to grow, and he wants to do it through you, the hands and feet of Jesus. And so you can trust he's going to open the doors. Just you do your part of going to him, be drawn to him, be filled up with love because he loved you first, and then go start pouring your 5-gallon bucket out on people. Let's aim to be 5-gallon buckets that are always full, yet always being tipped out. Amen? All right, until the next time, hopefully it will be in person. If not, well, either way, the Lord bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you and give you peace.